It's Tuesday, it's 8 o'clock. Welcome to The Issue. I'm Mark Carr, and today we will have Carla Nell from the Burlington Chamber of Commerce as our guest. But first of all, Deb.
Hi.
Again,
Here we are.
After last night.
I know.
That was an interesting evening.
Wasn't it? It was interesting, and I think what was more interesting to me anyway, was watching the reactions this morning and how people are talking about, we now have 4 different countries in one. And I thought that was actually a very sad thing to hear, that that's the impression that people have walked away from the election with.
Well, just think of the major parties. They were all not winners.
That's a better way to put it than what you had said before. Yeah, yeah. They were not successful in having a majority.
I think it was worse than that. But we're not here to talk about the election.
We will cover it a little bit, I'm pretty sure.
So
yes.
You've brought on Carla.
Yes, Carla Nell, who is the president and CEO of the Burlington Chamber of Commerce, and it's so timely that we're talking to you this morning, Carla, or today rather. And we should recognize right off the top that this is Small Business Week. So all of this has you are the perfect guest to have today a business organization right after the federal election and celebrating Small Business Week.
Yes, and thank you for inviting me to join you today.
Yeah.
It's delighting.
But you're new relatively new at the chamber.
I am. Yes, I took on this role 3 months ago at the end of July, so it's almost 3 months to the day, in fact, that I began my new role with the chamber. It's been a great experience, even in a very, very short period of time. We have a wonderful membership. I've been very embraced in my role, so it's been fabulous to date. Yeah, really enjoying it.
This is a little bit of coming home for you, I think.
It is, very much so, very much so.
Now you've been thrown into it in an incredible way in that your board has changed.
Yes.
You've gone to the Ontario Chamber Conference or Convention, and you've gone to the Canadian Chamber Convention.
Yes.
And out of all of this comes policies and so on that are put forward to the provincial government and the federal government as a result of the conversations that can happen between chambers.
Correct.
Let's let our viewers know what the mandate of any chamber is, though.
Well, chambers across the country really are intended to be the voice for the business community, that focal point, that key organization that businesses can turn to support their advocacy efforts and to ensure that the interests of the business community are understood and heard at all levels of government, whether it's local, provincial, or federal. And in the last 16 months in Ontario, we've had 3 elections. So we've seen some very significant changes on local council. We had a new provincial government elected in last year, and now we have a very changed federal landscape. So, but what's important is that businesses and the chamber community across the country really do work together to clearly define the priorities of the business community, and we work very collaboratively to advocate for those interests, to ensure that perspectives are understood, that opinions are sought as public policy is being developed.
And Carla, what with all of those changes municipally, provincially, and now federally, what has been accomplished by the Canadian Chamber? First of all, and second of all, what has been accomplished by the Burlington Chamber?
Well, the Burlington Chamber takes its advocacy role very seriously. We do have a group of experts from our membership who have formed a political action committee that plays a key role in helping us to develop our positions, opinions, and to articulate those to the appropriate decision makers. So that group has been working quite tirelessly over the last year and a half to survey our membership, to understand what the concerns are locally, provincially, as well as federally. And all of that then ladders up through the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, of which we are a member, as well as the Canadian Chamber, who play important roles in advocating at the provincial and federal levels on issues that matter to businesses across Ontario as well as throughout Canada. And most recently, the Canadian Chamber of Commerce developed a Vote for Prosperity platform that was endorsed by the Burlington Chamber as well as the Ontario Chamber community that lays out 7 key imperatives, issues that are of most relevance and greatest concern to the business community, and that we see as being key to the economic prosperity and competitiveness of this country and the business landscape moving forward.
And they are?
Well, they are. Probably not any great surprise. One of the key concerns is the skills gap and accessing the right talent at the right time and ensuring people are in the right place. So that's a cornerstone issue, and certainly one that we heard very loudly and clearly when we canvassed businesses in Burlington. It was one of their most pressing concerns. The other major imperative is the desire to ensure that we have a fair and efficient tax system in Canada. And the Canadian Chamber is asking the federal government to appoint a Royal Tax Commission to look at our complete tax system in a very comprehensive way. And that has not been done since 1960. And there's a growing concern that the complexity of our tax rules are actually detracting from investment and impeding economic growth across the country. There's also a concern about infrastructure spending and making sure that infrastructure that supports business and communities is well and properly funded. So that's another key issue and area. The regulatory burden that businesses face is another key concern, reducing red tape. One of the Canadian chambers, and again shared by the broader chamber community, is an ask to ensure that for every new regulation that is created, that 2 be removed. So it's the 2-to-1 rule that many of us are advocating for quite loudly. We also have a position on pharmacare, trying to ensure that people have access, but at the same time not necessarily replacing or reducing coverage. And we certainly want to ensure that the cost of that does not become onerous for the business community and its employees. So there's really a wide range of issues that the Vote for Prosperity platform speaks to, and a series of very detailed recommendations that the Canadian Chamber has developed. And so now that we have the new government in place ostensibly after last evening's election, the Canadian Chamber will be looking at how do we advocate within the context of this new political reality to ensure that the business community's perspectives are on the agenda and that they are thoughtfully considered.
Deb, you mentioned when you were president of, or chair of the
Which at the time was president, yeah.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah.
Of the Burlington Chamber.
Yeah.
You said that red tape was on your agenda, and it's still on the agenda. So does that mean that you haven't achieved what you want to achieve in terms of cutting the red tape?
I think this is an ongoing concern. The economy is changing, and as we see government trying to respond to changes that are happening, oftentimes there is a desire to regulate. But at the same time, we also have to look at the existing regulatory framework and ensure that as we're creating new regulations, we are at the same time modernizing and trying to ensure that it doesn't become overly burdensome. Right. And it's an issue that is not just being faced by the federal government, but also the provincial government. It factored very prominently in our last provincial election platforms. And even locally, we've recently had a red tape, red carpet task force that has developed a series of recommendations that the City of Burlington's council has adopted, and that they will be looking at moving forward with a view to trying to streamline processes even at the local level. So it's not an easy problem to solve, frankly, but ensuring that there is that mindset in place and that efficiency always is considered as part of that decision making is truly important.
Well, you see, I view it as much easier to accomplish. Maybe it's a long task to accomplish, but I think you can attack the red tape by sending somebody across the country to find out exactly where it exists and then taking those off the backs of small business.
And I think you'll see...
I mean, it's an easy solution.
And I think you see, if you look at the Canadian Chamber's very detailed policy resolutions book, which is revisited annually at their annual conference, you know, that many of the recommendations that are being made are in fact focused on doing just that. Not just reducing red tape, but also on how do we roll out the red carpet? I mean, how do we improve access to resources? How do we remove trade barriers, among other things? How do we support new sectors in our economy or others who are now participating in unprecedented numbers, like women and young professionals and newcomers? So, I mean, it's a very complex economic landscape that we operate in.
Yeah. And I think the whole idea behind the ability of the chambers at all levels to work together is to recognize that in business, as in many things that we do in our life, there should not be a perception of borders. There are not and should not be borders in doing business, and sometimes it's the regulations that get in the way to cause the borders.
You mean the provincial borders? Provincial trade is more difficult than...
well, and that's exactly the thing. Yeah. But I think, you know, as we move forward and as we watch how things develop, with all the tools that we have to use today to do business around the world, we talked about it a little bit last night. The idea of borders start to fall down and they start to disintegrate because you can't do business well, you can't live well, you can't function well if you have borders. And so the chambers themselves look at what might be good for Burlington, as you and I were talking about. What's good for Burlington is good for Halton, is good for Ontario, is good for Canada. And you have to be able to share that, and you have to be able to experience it, and you have to be able to use it as a tool to improve the environment for business to continue and invite business to be part of the Canadian economy.
And I think that's why you see so much alignment between the chamber community, you know, whether it's locally in Halton region, across the GTA, the Ontario Chamber, the Canadian Chamber. I mean, there is definitely, I would say, the spirit of cooperation and partnership runs very deeply through the chamber network. And we're trying to build partnerships not just as chambers, but partnerships between businesses in order to create opportunity. We're also looking to build partnerships with, you know, other key community partners, whether it's Burlington Economic Development, the City of Burlington, the region who has resources that they dedicate towards economic development, et cetera. So, you know, that spirit of cooperation and collaboration is, I would say, a hallmark of the chamber community and trying to promote that.
And I like that. It sounds good, but do you have examples of where that has worked in the past? And well, do you have any examples that you can tell us about?
Well, I think one of the most recent examples would be the announcements that were made in August of this year by the federal government affecting their women entrepreneurship strategy. And, you know, we had a number of cabinet ministers that came to Halton that made these announcements about improvements to funding to ensure that women entrepreneurs would have access to the capital and support and other resources that they need to fully participate in the economy. And there were a number of Halton and Burlington-based businesses that were the recipients of those grants. So I do think there are instances where, again, this broad network of collaboration allows us and helps us to escalate issues. They bubble up to the right levels of government, and then we see evidence of that, you know, back in Burlington and across Halton, when our counterparts at these different levels of government recognize all of the good things that are happening here, and then reinforce that by way of tangible support.
Do you find that you are at odds, the chamber is at odds with the general public out there, because I heard during the federal election, business needs to pay more taxes. For example, that's kind of throwing all of your members into one pool, and I don't think that it's applicable to all of your members, but that's the perception from a great number of the public, that we're always working towards helping business. What about me?
Well, and I certainly haven't experienced an anti-business sentiment in the community. If anything, one of the things that has struck me so loudly and clearly since taking on this role is the incredible community partnership and spirit that exists. The Burlington Chamber's members not only contribute economically to our growth and prosperity, but we pride ourselves on the fact that so many of our members have such a strong sense of corporate social responsibility. We see them giving back to the community in so many ways, not only business owners, but also their employees, whether it's through volunteering time, committing financial resources. I think we take great pride as a business community in by extension, the other amazing things that happen and that have made Burlington the #1 ranked city in Canada to live by Maclean's magazine. And I see all the time our members asking for opportunities, to build relationships with not-for-profits and other charities within the community. And many of them not only work here or have businesses here, but they live here too. So they see themselves as being a key part of the community. And one of the interesting trends that I've observed is the growing number of not-for-profit organizations that are becoming chamber members, not only because they want access to resources that will allow them to run themselves in a business-like manner, but also to develop those key partnerships with, again, those who have that corporate sense of social responsibility that is really making a difference and an impact. So partnership, again, is something that runs through our community, I believe.
Speaking of partnerships, one of the things that I was probably most impressed with or engaged with during my board years was the ability for the Burlington Chamber, excuse me, to have the ear of our local politicians, our local representatives at all levels, the politicians. And those are developed relationships. How now does the chamber interface with our various levels of government locally?
Well, we do that often and frequently, and I think we can take great pride in the fact that we do have very strong relationships, not only with our electeds, but also with our non-electeds. We work closely with the City of Burlington staff, our other partners that really shape the economic landscape across this particular community. So building relationships is a key part of how we ensure that the business community's interests remain at the forefront of decision making. And as we mentioned earlier, there has been a lot of change in the political landscape in the last 16 months, but it is an area of focus, one that we don't lose sight of, and we're looking for opportunities to have that important two-way conversation. We want to not only be bringing things to our elected officials, but we also want to be a resource to them as well, and to be there to help share insights that they can rely upon to inform their decision making when they're dealing with important public policies.
For example, were you consulted about Burlington's move to stop development for a year? And if you were consulted, how do you react to something like that?
Well, I personally was not involved, having only been in this role for the last 3 months. But what I will say is that, dovetailing with some of those early decisions that were made, which I believe were a temporary moratorium in order to give everyone time to catch their breath within the context of a new council and to decide how to move forward, we did see the red carpet task force being formed, and I think that was an important development. And certainly the Burlington Chamber was very actively consulted, as were a broad cross-section of our members. And I think you see the insights and the input reflected in the recommendations that were ultimately approved by Council late in September. The next step, however, will be the implementation phase, and we have certainly communicated to our counterparts at the city that, again, we want to be constructive, we want to be involved, we want to assist in whatever way we can to ensure that the implementation goes smoothly and that ultimately we can see measurable results from any changes that may result from that review.
So you work hand in hand with the economic development communities and committees that are set up in Burlington, Oakville, Milton.
Well, and we do have a very powerful alliance in Burlington known as Team Burlington, which is comprised of the Chamber as well as representatives of the Aldershot and downtown business improvement areas. We work closely with Tourism Burlington as well as with the Burlington Economic Development Corporation. So it's a strong alliance, and we're all looking at how we can improve the climate to ensure that we can attract and retain and support businesses who are located, particularly as they meet their growth objectives.
And I think this is one of the things that's so great about the Team Burlington concept is a business coming into Burlington doesn't have to say, okay, well, I have to talk to economic development about this, and I have to talk to the BIA about this because I want to be downtown, and I have to talk to the Chamber about this because whatever. The approach can be made to any one of them, and
we loop one another in.
It becomes this collaborative to encourage business in the city and beyond. I mean, if a business wants to grow to another part of Halton, those connections are there. So it's not again. Get rid of the borders. It's whatever is going to be best for business and for the community at large is a big role that the Burlington Chamber of Commerce and any Chamber of Commerce will play, I believe. What's going to be the impact for you, do you think, going forward with the results of last night?
Well, we have very strong relationships with our federal elects who are returning. So I think we're in very good stead in that regard. We have a constructive working relationship, lots of ongoing dialogue. There's been a receptiveness to work with the Burlington Chamber and business community demonstrated on both Karina and Pam's part. So I feel that we're in good hands. Both are experienced, have a track record of public service, and we certainly look forward to continuing that positive working relationship moving forward.
Mm-hmm. And can they achieve some of the goals that you want to achieve? Because it's great to say what you want, but I think you have to track and ensure that those goals that you set out for yourselves and government are actually achieved. And how's that going to work?
Well, and that's really why that national chamber network is so important, that we have those expert, dedicated advocacy resources working at the federal level, making sure that the voice of business is heard in Ottawa. And at the same time, we need to do our part locally to work closely with our federal MPs to ensure that we identify opportunities for us to work together, that when there are made in Burlington solutions that will help solve some of the issues and challenges, that we surface that and we ensure that people are alive to what is happening. I think all of this is intended to be very constructive. We all want this community to thrive. We all want economic prosperity, and we understand how important it is in contributing to our quality of life. So I'm confident moving forward that, again, working with our counterparts at the Ontario Chamber level, the Canadian Chamber level, and then continuing our efforts to build those strong relationships and partnerships locally, that we'll be able to make progress.
So in the last couple of minutes that we've got left, time goes very quickly. Can you give me one objective that you want to achieve in the next couple of years that is achievable?
Well, I think the appointment of the Royal Commission on Tax is achievable. I think that if you look at our Vote for Prosperity platform, that ranks as the first imperative. We need that comprehensive review of our existing tax system, and we need to look at it through a lens of ensuring that there is reduced complexity and that it does not become a barrier to investment and economic growth. So that would be the one thing that I would single out, the day after the election as being a key priority for this government. It's something we'll be looking for.
And we hope to see a solution to that issue, and hopefully it will be resolved. I think it'll take much longer than any one government. However, if successive governments choose to pick up that mantle, then I think we'll see some positive movements for it. So I want to thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, and perhaps I'll see you at one of our many Small Business Week events this week. There's a lot going on in Burlington to celebrate the business community.
Yes.
So,
and how do people find out about it?
Well, you can visit our website, theburlingtonchamber.com. All of our events are available through our calendar there, and you can also follow us on social media, whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. So there'll be lots of information being shared.
So, and what's happening this week in terms of?
Well, tonight we have a terrific Business After 5 and trade show happening at the Burlington Performing Arts Center, and tomorrow we have a Business Before 9 happening at Vikings Landing that's co-sponsored by the BDC. So, 2 events within the next few hours that folks we hope to see many at.
Yes, and it is. I think it's important to note that any Chamber of Commerce, and very proudly I say Burlington Chamber of Commerce, does not limit the size of business. You can be a single owner, entrepreneur, and you can be a multinational corporation and still derive benefit from Burlington.
Are you a member?
I am.
Oh.
Are you?
No.
Okay, there you are.
We'll talk about that after
yes.
the show.
Do I get a discount?
Yes.
But
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming on and really explaining what the Chamber is. People hear about the Chamber, but I'm not sure that they really understand all of the complexities that the Chamber deals with. And you and Deb in particular know about those complexities and how to achieve the goals that you set out for yourselves. So thank you very much for joining us. And Deb, thank you very much.
Oh, this is always fun, Mark. I always love spending time with you. And I'm not being sarcastic. It sounded a little sarcastic, but you know, we bring a lot of information, I think, and you do a wonderful job on this show. So, cheers to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And we appreciate you watching tonight. And remember, it is The Issue here on your TV.